Welcome back into my art studio and the third and final video of my tutorial, Polar Bear at the Pier. And here I'm continuing to add more shading and refining the detail on the structure of the polar bear's arm and going back and forth with the dark and light charcoal pencils. The white charcoal and black charcoal define the shape by showing the light and dark values, and where the light is hitting, you'll see I'm putting a lot more light color on the polar bear's shoulder and arm, where there's a little bit more light coming from that direction. And on the opposite side of the polar bear, you'll see more shading getting added in. But here on the paw, I'm just creating more depth and dimension of the shape. And as I created the initial drawing for this piece, it's something you can modify as you're adding in the light and the dark. And I decided to make this paw a little bit larger than I had initially drawn out. So in making that decision, I will just be extending that outline on the paw and creating that sense of roundness and realism to the paw, and where the light and the shadow intersect and blend together. And just going back and forth with these two pencils to change the tonality and the amount of shading that we have going. And as I'm shading in the jacket, you'll see I'm working outside the line of that jacket. I know that the pants of the polar bear are going to be darker, so extending outside of that line works just fine. And now I'm just redefining the outlines. Those outlines will become blended in. It's just going to help guide me as I'm continuing to add more shading and values of light and dark. And I'm just going to increase the speed here for this little segment. Now I'm going to start laying in the darker area of the pants and coloring them in, because this is pretty much the first layer. There's a little light indication of where the pants will be. I haven't actually laid down any charcoal on this section yet, and I'll be refining this, but getting a first layer down here, and then we'll go back over it with some white charcoal. And now bringing that white charcoal, the white pastel pencil, to start blending in and modifying some of that black charcoal that we had laid down. Continuing to add more layers here, we're going to also be modifying the light and shadow. And these are going to be fairly dark pants, as you can see over in the finished piece on the upper left-hand side of this. These pants are a little bit darker than the jacket, and you can make that determination. You could make these lighter pants, you could add patterns to them, you could add rips to them. This is more of an illustration style, a little bit more whimsical. So you create that world that you want. You make the decisions of how you want these areas to be in your own drawings. If you're doing a portrait and you're trying to go for realism and you want to duplicate a pet portrait or a human portrait, everything has to be very precise based on the on what the client wants. If they want you to draw someone that looks very much capturing their likeness and the realism of it, then you want to stay true to that. But when you're doing illustration work and just working from multiple references to get ideas and using your imagination, you can determine and make changes where you see fit. And I want to bring up the ruler now to get a straight line to edge exactly where this pier, where this wooden decking area is going to be meeting the water, and try to give a nice solid line for that. So I've indicated roughly in the earlier drawing and sketch where that would be, but I just want to make that a little bit more solid at this point, and I'll continue to darken in and create that decking for that area below that line. And now continuing to add more charcoal to the pants, and we'll keep working on this and developing these layers and creating more value of light and dark. Blending in the white pastel, and we'll just continue doing this until we completely cover that paper. You can see some of the small dots of the paper that's showing through, and that's fine. That's allowing us to put more of these layers in to refine and define what we want to create with this piece, and continue working these and go back and forth with the charcoal and pastel pencil. And continuing to add more dark charcoal pencil, and we'll blend again with the white pastel, and I'll speed this section up. And now starting to blend in the boots. And the shape looks a little bit funny when you don't have the values of light and dark in, showing the highlights and the shadow. And we're going to build that in. But you'll see the feet don't look complete at this point, and that will make more sense as we continue to add the light and the dark to the boots. And using the ruler, I added lines in showing where the deck flooring will be, where the boards will be. Those are going to be blended in. They'll pretty much they'll be there, but they're not going to be as prominent as this. I just wanted to get a sense of there being decking, and that the bottom of that is pretty much where the drawing is going to stop. And as I go back and forth, starting to lay in the dark charcoal, you'll see I'm crossing over into the piling. And a lot of these are going to blend. You don't want any hard, fast lines outside of your drawings or illustrations. If you do, it looks like it's not natural. So we want a natural, smooth flow, and we're going to just lightly go over some of the pieces, especially if they're in a similar value of range of dark or light. So those middle grays will somewhat blend together. You don't have to dance around them with your pencil. You can blend a little bit, and you can continue to refine the shape as you go along. And as I continue to work on this decking, I'm using really light pressure. Sometimes it'll sound like the pencil is using more pressure and scraping, but it's very light pressure. It's mostly the weight of the pencil. I'm just slowly adding these in. I don't want to crush the paper, and bring it to a place where I can't add more layers in. So just lightly going over this. Now I'm going to turn this right side up and continue working on the boots. And you'll start to see these boots, and the shape of the boots rather, come to life as we add more detail in the shading and in the highlights, and that's sometimes you can take a basic shape and it could be a shoe or a foot, and just because of the angle and the perspective, the light and the shadow has a lot to do with it. If you just see a basic outline, it can look odd. It can look like the foot maybe isn't there, isn't placed right. But once you get the shadow and the light areas placed in properly, things will start to appear the way that they should. Very light pressure. Just you can see how I'm holding the pencil. It's mostly just the weight of the pencil I'm using here. And you can see how I'm building in that shadow near the polar bear's feet, and we're going to continue to darken this deck, but keeping in mind where the shadow and the light are, and casting these shadows will help give that more of a realistic look and a depth of dimension, with the darkest areas being right underneath the soles of the feet and over to the left of the polar bear. And I'll just speed up this section as I'm going to continue going back and forth with the light and the dark charcoal pencils, and you'll still see and get a sense of where this is going. Now it's time to add some of these highlights into the water. Just skimming across, just imagining the waves just being very gentle, knowing that the water is not completely calm and still as it might be on a lake. There's a little bit of rippling here and a little bit of movement, so just going to bring that out a little bit on the lights and the darks. and continuing to refine and build those values of light and dark, you'll see these boots come together, have more depth and dimension, and they'll just blend. They'll look more natural. And we're doing that with the light and the dark charcoal pencils and continuing to refine the shape and determine where that shadow and the light meet. And we're just going to continue blending this until we get just the right look that we want. So I'm continuing to blend and add the shadow underneath the polar bear's feet, and going to transition back and forth with the dark charcoal pencil and the light pastel pencil, get this into a smooth and believable shadow underneath the polar bear. And with this drawing now complete, I'll add in my signature and this will be finished. And this drawing is now complete. The illustration of polar bear at the pier is finished, and I hope you learned some techniques and some tips here that might help you in your drawings and illustrations. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing you next time. A lot more on the way. Thank you for watching.